I'm Caleb with the Nestucca, Neskowin, and Sand Lake Watershed Council. I am the Outreach and Project Development Manager. I wanted to give a quick introduction on the goals of our educational film here today. We were asked, we being the Watershed Council, were asked by the Neskowin Community Association to make a short film on what is a watershed, what does a Watershed Council do, and most specifically how you guys can get involved. Our goals as a Watershed Council is really to engage the community and get people to change the way that they interact with their watershed. So hopefully you guys can learn something today, and there'll be lots of opportunities to get involved if you're interested. So thanks for watching.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association describes a watershed as a land area that channels rainfall and snowmelt to creeks, streams, and rivers, and eventually to outflow points such as reservoirs, bays, and the ocean. Similarly, the United States Geological Survey describes a watershed as an area of land that drains all the streams and rainfall to a common outlet, such as the outflow of a reservoir, mouth of a bay, or any point along a stream channel. Another really great tool for visualizing a watershed is a website called wikiwatersheds.com. I'll show you how to use it now. To access the Wiki Watershed toolkit, you're first going to want to open a web browser and then navigate to the wikiwatershed.org website. It should be your first option. Now that we're on the Wiki Watershed website, we will be given the option to explore many different features. We will choose the Model My Watershed on the top left. We can launch the app. It now displays an Esri-style map that you're probably familiar with. Since we are discussing the Neskowin watershed, we can begin to zoom in on that area. Once you have zoomed into an appropriate level, you can click the Get Started button on the left. Here you're given some more options. We will choose the third one down, Delineate Watershed, with a continental US medium resolution. At this point, Wiki Watershed is ready to delineate any watershed in which you click on the outlet point. Since I clicked on the outlet of Neskowin Creek, it delineated the entire Neskowin watershed. Within this tool, you're given a lot of information, such as the number of stream miles, the land type use, soil infiltration rates, terrain, and so forth. Alternatively, if you wanted to delineate a sub-basin within the Neskowin watershed, you could simply click back and do that same process again. This time we'll click on a tributary within the Neskowin River. This would be the Prospect Creek subbasin of the Neskowin watershed. So now that we have a good working knowledge of what a watershed is, let's take a more in-depth look at some of the natural processes and ecosystem functions that occur in a healthy watershed.
For this next section, part 2 of what is a watershed, I'm going to give a broad biological and ecological context to some different watershed functions and ecosystem benefits and services. This introduction will hopefully set the stage for Garshaw talking more about specific projects that the Watershed Council does. To simplify this topic down to something suitable for this presentation, I had to admit a lot of detail. It's a really big topic with a lot of different moving parts. Something that I found was really, really helpful to sort of simplify it was some Environmental Protection Agency watershed training modules that I found online. They were really concise with some great information, so I used them a lot, and I'll cite them and reference them accordingly, and I'll add some website links towards the end of the presentation here. In addition to that EPA website, which I'll share with you, there's some really, really good books about watershed health, particularly salmon, because that's the area we're in. And I want to share a couple with you now. That's sort of the direction I would go, or I hope you guys go, is to pick up some reading on your own and start to educate yourself on these issues of watershed health and in salmonid populations. But here's a few that I would recommend. They're fairly easy reading, but also contain some great information, so good for a beginner to an expert alike. The first one is by David Montgomery. It's called The King of Fish, The 1,000-Year Run of Salmon. David Montgomery was a geomorphologist at the University of Washington. So this book is really focused on habitat and things like sediment transport and floodplain connectivity and disconnectivity. So that's a really, really relevant book to hear this Tillamook area in our different agricultural settings. So that's a great one I'd recommend. Another one by a University of Washington professor is Salmon, People, and Place by Jim Lichtowich. He is a fisheries biologist, so this one talks more about fish than it does about habitat, but it also talks a lot about habitat. And where this one's a little different is he really delves into some of the cultural and spiritual benefits that a healthy watershed and healthy salmon runs provide. So another book that's great from a little bit different perspective. Another one by the same author is Salmon Without Rivers. This was the first book that Jim Lichtowich wrote. And this book looks into the idea of growing salmon without healthy watersheds and healthy rivers via hatcheries, and sort of the fallacies that were involved in that myth, and how the hatchery program didn't work out quite as well as we'd want without a healthy watershed. A healthy watershed is key to having healthy salmon runs. Another salmon specific book that it's got a lot of information, it's kind of difficult reading, but I'll still recommend it, is Salmon 2100. A number of different experts in their respective fields were asked, what do you think salmon will look like in the year 2100 at our current trajectory? I'll kind of admit that the authors don't give a great diagnosis for salmon unless we sort of change the ways that we interact with rivers in our watersheds. But again, I'd recommend that because it is a wealth of knowledge. And the last one I'm going to recommend is less about watersheds and salmon, but one that I use all the time when I'm out hiking, and that's Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast by Pojar and McKinnon. This is probably the book I carry around the most. It's always in my truck, always in my backpack when I'm out hiking. And this has all the plants in our area here in the Neskowin, Nestucca watershed, and up to British Columbia. So this is a really great book. It's got great pictures, tons of great information. So definitely pick that one up as well. And these last two things I'm going to recommend are more technical documents. The first one is the river continuum concept. I'm not sure where you can get this for free online. It is an academic journal, so it would be in any academic journal database, but you can probably also find this online. I'll put a link to it at the end of the talk here. And the last one is a stream evolution model integrating habitat and ecosystem benefits. So this paper was put out in 2004, and since then, actually when I printed this in 2016, so only 2 years later, it had already been cited 4,888 times. So this is really a seminal, game-changing paper about how river systems evolve within a watershed. I wish I could go into more detail on all of these papers, but I really encourage you to pick this one up. If you can't find it online, get in touch with me and I'll see what I can do if I can dig it up and send it on over to you. This is really, really a great paper on how channel morphology evolves within a watershed. So with that said, let's take a little bit more of a look at some of the natural functions and ecosystem processes, or ecosystem services and benefits. Again, a real broad look, but it should give you some information to get you started. So, all right, let's take a look.
So for this next section, which is part 2 of what is a watershed, we're going to discuss some watershed functions. We simplified it down, or I simplified it down into 3 main topics: transport and storage, cycling and transformation, and ecological succession. I got a lot of this information from an EPA watershed training module. The link is there at the bottom. If you're interested, there's a lot more information on that website. It's really accessible, and so I'd recommend checking that out if you're interested. So when we talk about transport and storage, we're primarily talking about 3 things: the transport and storage of water. A watershed is essentially an enormous precipitation collecting and routing device where water falls in the headwaters, moves through the forested areas into the riparian and down into the river through various pathways. There's also the transport and storage of sediments. As that water is moving, it collects sediments and also moves that sediment, sometimes in very, very large earth flows like landslides, but more commonly just in smaller sediment transport through our regular flooding. In addition to that, the sediment and the water, you also get pollutants picked up. They tend to bind to sediment and move through the watershed in that manner. Our primary pollutants are E. coli, and sediment is actually considered a pollutant when it reaches a certain level. And frequently during our really big winter storms, the sediment exceeds that pollution threshold. So it reaches a level where sediment is considered to be a pollutant as well. So cycling and transformation also has 3 main points to it. One being carbon cycling, which is what we call food webs, starting with photosynthetic animals, moving all the way up to apex predators, and how that carbon cycles through at different rates, and the way it changes, not forms, but the way it cycles through different forms. The next one I would point out is biogeochemical and nitrogen cycling. Biogeochemicals being phosphorus, potassium, and other elements that move through the watershed. Nitrogen is a cycle that's very well documented and detailed because nitrogen is frequently a limiting factor. That would be another example of a cycle. The last one is decomposition, and that's the breaking down of energy-rich organic molecules into forms that are once again usable. So this is a little bit different than carbon cycling, but I guess somewhat similar to that. Maybe the difference would be that decomposition is usually done by microorganisms, and it's breaking it down into more of its constituent elements. The last watershed function, or at least the last one that we'll talk about in the simplified version, is that a watershed is really dynamic. It's always in flux. It's always changing. There's really no steady state watershed. Any of our attempts to keep a watershed from changing, it's usually a kind of an expensive proposition. So we're learning to live with the watershed, maybe taking a more ecological approach. And another thing is that within a watershed, there's a variety at spatial scales. So within, say, Neskowin watershed, there could be an old growth forest, there could be a timber plot, there could be some meadows, there could be houses. There's going to be a lot of variety within that one watershed. So we call that a variety at spatial scales. Again, check out that EPA website. That'll give you a ton more information. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is some ecosystem benefits and services. I think these are kind of self-explanatory, but definitely want to point them out because it's really important to know that there is a lot of value in a healthy watershed. Before I talk about any of these, I want to say that it's really impossible to calculate what a healthy watershed is really worth. In any accounting effort is typically, in my opinion, it's erred on the side of not valuing the watershed highly enough. There's certain intrinsic parts of a watershed that are just really hard to measure, but some things we can measure are improved water quality. Saves money for the water treatment facilities if the water coming in is of high quality. Carbon storage opportunities, what's becoming known as blue carbon or ecosystem carbon, where carbon is being stored in something like an estuary like Sand Lake. Increased resiliency in the face of climate change. Some reduced risk for invasive species colonization. In certain areas, invasive species are a very, very, very expensive thing to combat. So the healthier the watershed is and the more native plants, you're going to reduce the risk for invasive species colonization, reduce flood mitigation costs, and increase tourism revenue. That's becoming increasingly well known that people want to get out and recreate in a beautiful watershed. So that's just a few, certainly not an exhaustive list, but that's a start on some of the ecosystem benefits and services. I mean, you could also definitely add things like fisheries to our area, fishing and hunting, things like that. I guess that could all go under increased tourism revenue, but yeah, the takeaway message is that a healthy watershed really is a valuable thing, especially here where we live. So I think that's going to be the end of my talk or my section, and now Garsha is going to talk a bit about what the Watershed Council does more specifically. So yeah, let's move on.
My name is Garsha Meady Abraham, and I'm the director and coordinator of the Watersheds Council. We have 2 people on staff, including myself and Caleb Menser, who's our outreach and project development manager, and we also have 9 board members. Our board members are the core of our Watershed Council. They drive all of our decisions, and they're really the heart of our organization. Our board is comprised of a diverse group of folks, and they include farmers, fishermen, folks who work in the forest resources industry, federal and local natural resource management agencies, and general subject matter experts and everyday citizens as well. So we have representation for every watershed within our council. And these watersheds include the Nestucca River watershed, the Little Nestucca River watershed, the Sand Lake watershed, and the Neskowin watershed. In summary, our Watershed Council works to improve the health of our watersheds through implementing restoration projects, streamside plantings, invasive species control, education, outreach, and community events related to the South Tillamook County watersheds. For this portion of the video, we're going to talk about the Neskowin watershed, what the Nestucca, Neskowin, and Sand Lake Watersheds Council is, what we do, and how Neskowin citizens can get involved. The mission of our Watershed Council, working in partnership with private and governmental stakeholders, is to improve the environmental health of our watersheds to benefit those who live and work within our boundaries and for the fish and wildlife that depend on it.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about major landowners in the Neskowin watershed. So I have Neskowin watershed highlighted here, and we're using the Oregon Explorer tool, mapping tool. This is oregonexplorer.info, and you go to tools and you go to Oregon Explorer map viewer. It's a very useful tool. You can put on many different layers. And so for now, we have our watershed highlighted with our creeks highlighted. This is the Neskowin watershed. And we're going to look at land ownership now. Okay, here we have the land ownership layer turned on. You can see in the upper watershed, I'm going to talk about it in terms of upper watersheds and lower watersheds, and I apologize, it's hard to see where the watershed is delineated. But in the upper watershed, we have sort of a checkerboard of U.S. Forest Service and private industrial timber. So the private or the public land is represented by the green, and the private industrial land is represented by this tan color. And this ownership layer is from 2015, so it might not be completely updated. So getting more into the lower watersheds, we have more privately owned land, and this includes woodlots, small woodlots as well as rural residential. And so that's represented by the yellow. And then as we get down into the very lower watershed, we have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Wildlife Refuge. And then we have the Neskowin Beach Golf Course, which is down here. And then we have the Oregon State Parks Wayside, which is down here. We also have a very small amount of land owned by the North Coast Land Conservancy that was donated by a private landowner up on Butte Creek. That's not on this map, but that's also part of the land ownership. So the Neskowin watershed is rich in natural resources. Our fish and wildlife are managed by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Our timber is managed by the U.S. Forest Service and private landowners, and this includes both private industrial timber companies and small woodlot owners. Our drinking water is managed by the Neskowin Water District up on Upper Hot Creek, and everybody really manages the watershed in a way. Every action we have plays a part in the watershed health. So this is an aerial photo of the Neskowin Beach Golf Course, and you can also see the National Wildlife Refuge in the background. You can see Butte Creek running through the golf course and Kiwanda Creek as well, and there's some residencies down here and forest up here, and it just shows that within the watershed we have many different types of landowners, and we all play a part in the overall watershed health. So roads are incredibly important to people, businesses, and the livelihood of folks living in South Tillamook County. Our roads down here are managed by Tillamook County Public Works, the Oregon Department of Transportation, private industrial timber companies, which manage their own roads, and private road owner associations and private landowners. All roads have some sort of impact to our watersheds, especially if they're poorly built. Roads can act as a direct pathway for surface runoff. This can decrease groundwater infiltration and soil storage, and eventually decrease summertime flows. The surface water runoff can also be highly erosive, causing sedimentation and greater erosion and incision in the stream, which can cause downcutting and the eventual lowering of the groundwater or of the water table. And essentially, they can alter natural drainage characteristics. Additionally, when roads and streams are hydrologically connected, chemical runoff generated from the road prism can enter the stream. The straightening and channelizing of streams to accommodate roads decreases habitat complexity. It confines the stream and cuts the stream off from its floodplain, which also decreases groundwater infiltration. So the chemical runoff and sedimentation I previously mentioned can have implications for drinking water as well. If this is occurring upstream of a drinking water intake, it can cause or it can necessitate additional purification and filtration, which can make the overall process more expensive and less feasible. And so this is sort of a part of the link between watershed health and drinking water and human health. So this is a photo of the crossing of Hawk Street and a wetland tributary at the OPRD wayside. You can see road failure here, two undersized culverts that are completely blocked. You can see surface water running completely over the road and scouring out portions of the road. And so this would be considered a large fish passage barrier, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's also a public safety hazard. This crossing will be addressed as a part of the larger Neskowin emergency egress project. So, undersized road and stream crossings can cause fish passage issues for several reasons. Um, Failing culverts physically block fish passage by having one end perched, or the culvert can also be dilapidated and cause a physical fish passage barrier. Um, Undersized culverts also concentrate stream flow, which can cause a fire hose effect, and this creates a velocity barrier for fish. They have a hard time moving through that fast flowing water. And additionally, undersized culverts block natural stream processes such as gravel and large woody debris transport, which are very important for fish habitat and stream and river processes. Um, and additionally, these small culverts put the road at risk of failure through blowout and flooding, which you could see in the previous slide. So these are just photos of various culverts that we have addressed or will address over the years. This top left and top middle, this is West Beaver Creek in the Nestucca watershed, and you can see that these culverts were very dilapidated and very close to failure. These bottom culverts, this is along South Beach Road in Neskowin, and this is Sutton Creek. And these culverts down here have not yet been replaced, but are slated for replacement. And these culverts are sort of buried in sediment, also dilapidated and approaching failure. And the road is at risk in this area as well. Our Watershed Council implements stream and river restoration projects to reestablish natural stream and river processes. These projects benefit fish and wildlife habitat, improve water quality, and improve infrastructure so it is resilient to climate change and natural disaster. We also implement habitat enhancement projects that directly benefit sensitive salmonid species. As mentioned earlier, much of our work is focused around fish passage, which is identified as a limiting factor for salmonid production in our basins. This means we replace old, failing, undersized culverts at road stream crossings with large culverts, or better yet, bridges. The stream bed at the new crossing structure is designed to create easy upstream passage for fish and also allows the river to transport wood and gravel that is essential to downstream habitat and general watershed health. Since the new crossing allows for full fish passage, the habitat upstream of the new crossing becomes available for fish use. Much of this habitat is critical for spawning and salmonid production. The new crossings are also designed to pass floodwater, thus the flood risk to the road is greatly reduced. Here you can see the result of a project our Watershed Council implemented in 2012 at the crossing of Butte Creek and a county road. This new structure passes fish easily, it can pass gravel and wood, and creates a more resilient road. Here's a photo of the project pre-construction. You can see that the culvert is undersized and blocks fish passage. Post-construction, the landowner donated a portion of her land to the North Coast Land Conservancy for environmental stewardship and preservation. So let's talk about Butte Creek a little more, since it's a highly productive stream in Neskowin, and it's really important for the overall watershed. As an example of some of the work that we do, our Watershed Council is working to address all the remaining fish barriers on Butte Creek. These barriers, there's 3 remaining barriers. The downstreammost barrier is 2 undersized culverts with top hinge tide gates. This is at the crossing of Hawk Street and Butte Creek near the Neskowin Beach Golf Course. These tide gates are always in the open position. However, the culverts themselves are undersized, and during high tides and during high water flow events, they get overtopped. They create velocity barriers for salmon traveling upstream. This project is fully designed. Our Watershed Council has worked with partners to fully fund the project as well. It's led by Tillamook County Public Works, and it will be implemented in the summer of 2021 as a part of the larger Neskowin Emergency Egress Road project, which also addresses barriers at the crossing of Hawk Street and Hawk Creek, and Hawk Street and a wetland tributary, which we saw earlier when we were discussing roads. The next upstream crossing is an ODOT culvert on Highway 101, the intersection of 101 and Butte Creek. This culvert is also undersized and was rated by ODOT as in a critical condition and approaching failure. The bolts are rusted. Water is traveling through very quickly, and it's causing a velocity barrier for fish. And ODOT is working to, or they have prioritized the project internally, and are they're looking for funding for a 2021 to 2024 replacement. And the last remaining barrier, the most upstream remaining barrier, is on Sunbow Drive, the intersection of Butte Creek and Sunbow Drive. This is one pipe that is undersized, and the bottom is rusted out and broken and approaching failure. Again, it's a velocity barrier. Because the pipe is undersized, it creates a fire hose effect. And so this was during a rain event in January of 2020. And you can see that water is traveling through very quickly. It's traveling out of the outlet, and you can see the drop over here. And so this makes it very difficult for fish to travel upstream. Currently, our Watershed Council is seeking funding for the design for this project. And so hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, we'll be able to replace this crossing in the summer of 2022. Streamside plantings, also known as riparian plantings, are an excellent and relatively easy way for a Watershed Council to engage landowners and make a large difference in improving habitat and watershed health. Our council has completed dozens of these riparian planting projects and currently has several ongoing. Streamside planting is important for several reasons. Riparian plants prevent stream and river erosion. They provide shading, which cools the water temperatures for salmonid habitat. They improve water quality. They improve habitat quality through eventual large woody debris recruitment. And they increase floodplain interaction, which is important for the water table and off-channel fish habitat. This is a side-by-side of pre-planting and post-planting project in the Neskowin watershed. This is up Slab Creek, and this occurred in the 2018-2019 planting season. Just to give you an idea of the scale, in 2020 we planted 11.1 acres and worked with 15 different landowners throughout all of our watersheds. The trees we plant are generally spruce, cedar, hemlock, maple, cottonwood, and alder, and the shrubs include twinberry, ninebark, dogwood, spirea, currant, cascara, thimbleberry, and elderberry. And of course, that we include willows as well. And oftentimes, landowners will prefer different plants as well. And of course, we work with landowners to plant the plants that they prefer. Another example of projects we do are habitat enhancement projects. These projects directly improve salmonid habitat and mostly include large woody debris placements. So large woody debris in streams increases gravel recruitment, which is really important for spawning fish. They provide shelter from predators. They provide shading and complex habitat for fish as well. They also can increase floodplain interaction, which is great for off-channel fish habitat. So these photos are from a large woody debris placement project that our Watershed Council conducted about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago now, in the upper Nestucca or upper Little Nestucca watershed at the confluence with Stillwell Creek. So these logs were placed by helicopter, and you can see this is pre-project. This is just after project implementation, so you can see that the logs are placed here. And this photo in the upper right is actually was taken in August 2019, about 10 years after the project, in the exact same spot. And so you can see that while it is in the summer and more vegetation would be growing during that season, there is generally more vegetation in this area because of the increased gravel recruitment. You can also see that there's a lot of channel complexity and a lot of gravel in this area now. And so it increases the overall habitat complexity of this area to benefit salmonid species. So another type of project we do are estuary restoration projects. Recent research has shown that estuaries are incredibly important for the life history of salmonids, especially in the rearing phase. In Oregon coast estuaries and in our estuaries as well, years of diking, ditching, and tide gate installation for farming and development has blocked off critical salmonid rearing habitat. So these projects often include the removal or breach of dikes to restore historic off-channel salmonid habitat. They also improve estuary water quality and restore vegetation communities that are native to our region. Another type of estuary project we're doing are tide gate inventories. So we're trying to understand the type, size, and location of these tide gates, which could potentially be estuary fish passage barriers. Additionally, the replacement, updating, or removal of failing tide gates can improve fish passage and water quality. And finally, the restoration of historical estuary channels to create more estuary rearing habitat. So these are photos of different estuaries in our basins. Upper left is the Nestucca estuary. This is the Nestucca Wildlife Refuge, right at the mouth of the Little Nestucca. And there are two tide gates, two failing tide gates, and some cross levees and interior ditches. So this project is replacing the two tide gates, cleaning the ditches, cleaning silt out of the ditches to improve water quality and salmonid habitat, to re-meander and restore some historical tidal channels in the interior of the ditches, and to also plant out some of these interior areas in the hopes that it'll restore water quality and the replacement of the tide gates will restore fish passage. The lower left, we see the Sandy Lake estuary south of Belts Dyke. So below this photo is Belts Dyke, and this is the part of the estuary that's blocked off by the dike and a small undersized tide gate. This project involves breaching Belts Dyke to restore the natural estuary regime. Also part of this project are to address three undersized culverts on Sand Lake Road that empty into the estuary. So it's both a tidal restoration and fish passage project. And finally, the view on the right, the picture on the right, we see the Neskowin Marsh, which is actually also an estuary zone. It's tidally influenced. And so the goal of this is part of the Neskowin Emergency Egress Road project. And the goal of this project is to restore fish passage and tidal exchange across the egress road, which runs along right here. Those are just some examples of projects that we're engaged in different estuaries in our basin. Another type of project our council is beginning to get involved in is water quality monitoring. Previously, our Watershed Council had been involved in bacteria and temperature monitoring through TEP's, that's Tillamook Estuary Partnership's Volunteer Water Quality Monitoring Program. We are currently developing our own water quality monitoring for temperature and bacteria. We were funded through the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board to start up a program. And particularly in Neskowin, there will be a special focus on bacteria monitoring. But we're going to be doing both temperature and bacteria throughout our basins. So monitoring is really important to understand patterns and trends in our watersheds, to establish baseline conditions for our watersheds, so we have reference conditions for future monitoring and also assessing water quality conditions post-project as well. It's good to have something to compare that to. Also, identifying streams and rivers that are temperature limited and have a negative impact on fish habitat that can be improved, and there's room for improvement. Identifies streams and rivers that have bacteria and can pose a health hazard for humans. To identify non-point sources of pollution, especially from agriculture, and just for future monitoring efforts as well. So these are sites that will be bacteria monitoring. TEP does some of these sites already, and we're just going to be adding on to that. And so this is all bacteria monitoring in Neskowin, focused around Neskowin Village. And we're hoping to have this program start up at the beginning of 2021. We've already established a sampling and analysis plan, and we're just working on getting volunteers and also getting all the equipment. So our Watershed Council has lots of fun and engaging events throughout the year. And I'll just go through some photos and show you what they're like. So this is a photo from the Nestucca Bay cleanup in the spring of 2019. We have this event every other year on odd years. And so we'll have one in 2021, hopefully. Neskowin Valley School plant propagation class. And so this is an watershed education event where we team up with TEP and hold a plant propagation class for kids so they can learn about how plants grow and native riparian vegetation. These are photos from various events. We have an event series in partnership with TEP called Explore Nature, and this includes many different events, but a lot of them are sort of outdoor related. And so the upper left is a nature hike in the Nestucca National Wildlife Refuge. And this one was sort of centered around silver spot butterfly habitat. This one in the upper right is the Whalen Island Scotch Broom Bust. And we also paired that with a nature hike on Whalen Island. We had folks from OPRD giving us a tour, leading the nature walk. The bottom left is the Little Nestucca paddle, and this was also an Explore Nature event. It was a kayaking event in the Little Nestucca River estuary area. And that was a lot of fun. That was in the summer of 2019. And our events this year have been limited due to COVID, but we were able to get out on a seed collection through the Northwest Oregon Restoration Partnership, and collect some seeds for them to propagate native riparian vegetation. Additionally, we have our science pubs, which are fairly popular events. The Pelican Brewery lets us host these events in their event room. We usually try to have 3 to 5 of these per year during the winter months. And so we had a great series last year, and we're hoping to get these started up as soon as we can, but obviously conditions have not allowed us to do this. So before we conclude our video, I also wanted to give a shout out to our partners who are incredibly important to our Watershed Council. Everything we do is collaborative. We wouldn't be able to get the amount of work that we do get done, completed without their help, whether it's through cash contribution or through technical assistance. So we work with the United States Forest Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, Tillamook County Soil and Water Conservation District, Tillamook County Public Works, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and some of our major funders are the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. We pretty regularly get funding from the Sayusla Collaborative Watershed Restoration Program, also known as the HEBO Stewardship Group. And we work very closely with Trout Unlimited and the Salmon Superhighway Collaborative, which is a sort of a group of partners that we are implementing these fish passage projects with. So yeah, those are our partners, and they're really important to us.
Well, so that's the end of our educational film. We hope you guys learned something and maybe are a little more excited about watershed restoration. If you're interested in getting involved in a project or volunteering with the council, you can reach out by phone, email, or visit our website, and we can get you directed in the right way. So thanks again for watching, and we look forward to seeing you this next year.
Hello. So we're sitting here with Guy Holsworth. He's our longest standing board member. How long have you been with the Watershed Council for?
I think 19 years.
19 years? Okay.
18 or 19 years.
Okay. In what year were we founded again? Do you remember?
I don't know. I wasn't part of the original group.
Okay.
But I think it was 5 or 6 years running before. I lived in Otis, so I couldn't be on it at first until I moved back over here.
Great. So how did you get involved? What made you get involved?
Well, I was recruited by the coordinator at the time, a friend of mine. And it also falls into the think globally, act locally kind of philosophy. Try to get something done in your own neighborhood.
Gotcha. Great.
That's why I joined up.
And before that, you were with the Water District, correct?
I worked for 34 years running the Neskowin Regional Water District.
Cool. Great. So that's kind of a unique perspective, having that water district, drinking water perspective, and then sort of overall watershed health perspective, looking at, fish and wildlife, big picture sort of things. So with your time with the Watershed Council, how have you seen the council itself grow in terms of mission and scope, but also in terms of its board composition?
Yeah, quite a bit. When I joined, we really weren't doing much. Tom McDermott was planting trees for us. And I became president my third meeting, so I still didn't know what we were doing then. It took a while. It does take a while to understand exactly how we function.
Yeah.
But I would say the board has just expanded so much, and the board we have right now is excellent, with people from all walks of life, different viewpoints, and we can get together and get these amazing projects done, which you actually do. We just kind of hired you, I guess.
Well, it couldn't be done without you guys as well, your support and direction and everything.
Well, yeah, the board's really grown, I think, and the council itself, which is everybody here, lives around here, has got more on board, and we had not never ripped a culvert out and built a bridge before Alex, really, as far as I know. And now it's commonly every day. What we do, 4 this year?
4 last year, yeah.
Four
two
bridges
this
in a year. It's
yeah,
pretty amazing.
It's a lot. Yeah, I mean, this, like I said earlier, this wouldn't be able to happen without board support and board direction and everything. So you guys are really the heart of the Watershed Council. So over the years, have you seen sort of an evolution or a change in watershed issues, especially focusing in on Neskowin? Has there been sort of a shift in focus at all, or just as we go through the times? I know this past couple decades, there has been a lot of development and a lot of new research, and we're learning a lot more about our watersheds. So just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
I don't know if it's a shift in focus, but an expansion of focus. In that, like I said, we never, as far as I know, never had ripped culverts out to open up streams for fish passage, which we routinely do now. We're planting trees. We're planting more trees now than ever, I believe. And just all together, new things come up. The Tidegate survey was a new thing, and that's still new for us as to where we go with that. But
Sure.
I think it's just been a general, the community at large is more interested in what we do, and because we've gotten a lot done, I think.
Absolutely. In terms of, like you're saying, thinking locally, what do you think Neskowinians should be thinking about when we're talking about our watershed, as a landowner or as a resident, or as just somebody who wants to do good by the environment and by the watershed and by fish and wildlife, but also for human health as well? What should folks be thinking about, and what can an average everyday Neskowinian do to sort of push this forward?
That's a good question. As far as how should they think about water, well, if you're living in Neskowin proper, that's your water source. That's everything you drink, cook with. You flush it down the toilet, it goes to the wastewater plant where it gets treated, and then eventually put back into the stream. So you are part of the cycle, basically.
Absolutely.
Maybe you never think about it that way, but so that's important on both of those things. You want the water to be clean when you drink it. You want the water to be clean when it goes back in the stream. And that happens here. Both very advanced treatment systems. As far as, wanting to do good, I think that's most people here. It's a second home. It's valuable property. It's valuable property for these reasons, for the beauty of the area. When I worked for the water district, people come into office and tell me how much they love the water. But they would take it home with them. So
That's interesting.
that always cracked me up.
Sounds kind of odd, but I mean,
Hey, I thought it was odd, but but hey, that's a nice compliment. But
yeah, absolutely.
it's a beautiful area, and people like to fish. If you like to salmon fish or steelhead or trout, you need clean water. You need proper food in the stream. You need everything to be proper for that to continue, so thinking out ahead, so your great-grandchildren can maybe come and catch a steelhead
Absolutely.
here or in the Nestucca or something.
Yeah.
So, and you might think about water as being a kind of a pain in the winter.
Yeah.
So,
The flooding and everything.
yeah, you have different thoughts about water.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we touched on this a little bit, but sort of that link between watershed health and drinking water, I think, is really important around here, especially since we have our water source up on Hawk Creek. So I think it's, it could be another thing that people need to think about.
It's really important here, due to the quality of the treatment systems, can handle turbidity. We certainly can't handle, organic chemicals and things. That's something you want to keep out of your drinking water and out of your stream in general. And here it's not a huge problem, but other places, in the valley over there, that would be an issue.
Absolutely.
But here, I don't know. I think people here are pretty used to having good water. And, maybe they're blasé about it, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I suppose so.
You're not worried about it, right? So
Until an issue comes up and people have to start thinking about it.
So with global warming and the change in weather patterns and possibly either more rain or less rain or extended periods of either one of those, that changes the whole system.
Right.
And that's something as a council, I think, will be more and more involved with.
Absolutely.
Flooding and drought, it seems to be possible.
Yeah, I mean, we live on the coast where we get plenty of rain, but there's still water quantity issues here, and water storage is an issue.
Oh, yeah. I've seen summers where we almost went into water curtailment in Neskowin 5 years ago, 6 years ago, so it could happen.
Sure. Interesting. Well, I guess we'll end there, but really appreciate your time. Thank you for being on the board for so long. Thank you for hanging in there. We really appreciate your perspective and your participation, and
I think bring one more thing up, even though we're not doing it right now, is our science pubs.
Yeah.
At the Pelican, which many people come to, but I think more could. We haven't exactly completely packed the room yet. Free science discussions, excellent speakers, and you can go buy dinner or buy a beer because the Pelican gives us the room for free. Been a great partner for us, and you come see amazing speakers. For I really miss science pubs right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Get on our mailing list so you know when the science pubs are.
Yeah, we'll have to get those up and going as soon as we can.
Oh yeah.
Those are a lot of fun. Well, thank you very much.